Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation The Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, April 26th, 2020, and we are live. We have a jam-packed show for you tonight. There's been a lot going on this past week, and we see that the things continue to heat up with coronavirus. We see that we continue to see more people unemployed. The unemployment numbers came out this past Thursday, and we saw 4.4 million people file for unemployment in the past week, bringing it to a total of 26 million people in 5 weeks. 26 million people in 5 weeks have filed for unemployment. Then also we saw that Congress this past week passed a $484 billion bill to help fight against coronavirus. There was additional money in the bill also for to help support small businesses. And there was $60 billion that was set aside for small businesses to go to small banks and small credit unions, especially those in urban areas, etc. So we're going to talk about this and a lot more on tonight's show. Also, we see that Donald Trump stuck his foot in his mouth once again this past week. Trump faces fallout from dangerous comments about consuming disinfectants to treat coronavirus. That happened at the White House coronavirus press conference on Thursday. And he had to backtrack those statements and say that he was being sarcastic. The next day he said he was being sarcastic. Now it looks like he will be scaling back the frequency of the daily White House coronavirus press conferences and possibly curtail his participation in them, which he really should. Okay. There's very little information that he gives in those press conferences, and they become like his rallies, since he cannot get out and go to rallies and campaign, etc., things like this. So it's just a lot of nonsense coming out of a lot of these press conferences. Okay, so we'll discuss that, and then on Politics Nation on Saturday, April 25th, Reverend Al Sharpton interviewed Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, and I'm going to share with you part of that interview, because Garland Gilchrist talked about how African Americans are 14% of the population in the state of Michigan, but are 40% of those who die from COVID-19. Okay, so I'm going to share with you part of that interview. So there's a lot continues to happen. We see more and more information coming out every day. We're going to give you an update also from the Washington Post, as well updates from the Washington Post. I have a ton of information to share with you all today. If you've been watching my follow me on Facebook, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook. You know, I've been doing some broadcasts throughout the week. We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page right now, The African History Network, The African History Network. Also follow me on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, on YouTube. Okay, so how's everybody doing on Facebook? We have Lakia and Michael just joined us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. All right, so let's continue here. Now, we saw that Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance-Bottoms received a text message calling her the N-word and demanding that she shut up and reopen Atlanta. This past week we saw that you had some Republican governors who are pushing to who are reopening their states, and they're reopening their states prematurely. Governor Brian Kemp of Atlanta, who stole the election from Stacey Abrams, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who stole the election from Andrew Gillum. And you had a lot of African American mayors, especially those in Atlanta, speaking out, saying that this was going to be harmful to African Americans. TheGrill.com is a good article about that. We'll discuss that some. And for the majority of the show, especially for all of our second hour, I want to revisit a topic I did in one of my broadcasts on March 10th. March 10th, if I remember correctly, was the primary here in Michigan and 5 other states. And I did a broadcast that day after I voted, dealing with Bernie Sanders' policies compared to Joe Biden's policies, and whose policies would be most beneficial for African Americans. Now, it wasn't based upon feelings and emotions. It was based upon an analysis that TheRoot.com put together, and they put together what's called a policy matrix. They put together a policy matrix, and they put together a team of policy experts, legal scholars, and political pundits, all of whom were African American, and they helped them devise a policy matrix. A policy matrix of 10 points, so that they could grade the policies of the Democratic candidates to see whose policies would be best for African Americans. And then you could just add it up. So it's scientific, okay? It's not based upon feelings and emotions. It's scientific. So looking at that premise, I want to revisit since Bernie Sanders has dropped out of the race and endorsed Joe Biden, and also we know even before that happened, we know Mike Bloomberg dropped out of the race and endorsed Joe Biden, and you had some African Americans saying, well, Mike Bloomberg has a black agenda, he has the Greenwood Initiative, so we should vote for Mike Bloomberg because he has a black agenda. Since then, Senator Elizabeth Warren has dropped out of the race. She endorsed Joe Biden. Okay, so the question that what I want to do is go back and look at the policies of Bernie Sanders. And this is not an attack on Bernie Sanders. If Bernie Sanders supporter, that's fine. Joe Biden supporter, that's fine. Elizabeth Warren supporter, Kamala Harris, whatever. I said from the beginning, whoever gets the Democratic nomination, that's who I'm voting for. Okay, period. Whoever gets the Democratic nomination, that's who I'm voting for. And we see Donald Trump is getting worse and worse and more dangerous by the day. Okay? And, you know, I hate to tell you, but I told you so. I told you this back in 2016. People ain't want to listen to me. I warned you about Trump in 2016, long before the election. People didn't want to listen to me. Okay, all right. I hope you're not drinking bleach. Okay? I hope you're not taking the malaria drugs that he's been pushing, but he's backed off of pushing them since studies have come out and shown in widespread usage they don't do what he's claiming that they do. All right, so, you know, once again, elections have consequences. Okay, some people want to learn the hard way. All right, you will learn that fat meat is greasy, which is probably why I'm a vegetarian. But anyway, so in our second hour, we're going to revisit that and look at the policies, but also we'll look at the policies of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, and also a black agenda. But I'm going to deal with 6 principles of political self-defense. Six principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. Okay, so you don't want to definitely miss the second hour. All right, so we'll deal with all that and a lot more because I have a lot of content laid out for tonight's show. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when we control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, and you can sign up for the email newsletter there as well. Hey, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network and support us. $, the AHN Show through Cash App. $, the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. That helps us keep doing the research, broadcast our Sunday night show, pay the bills, etc. Okay. And all of my DVD lectures are available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, including 6 principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans, and we have bundle packs there at my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com also. All right. Okay. I know we're coming up on a break here in a few minutes, so we're going to get this started before we go to the break. And I have a couple of clips also I want you to hear as well. So there's so much going on, so much content. Be sure to follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Okay, because a lot of this information covered throughout the week that I can't get to in this 2-hour show. All right. Well, I did a broadcast on what was it, Friday morning, dealing with the unemployment numbers that came out, right? And we saw that Thursday morning the unemployment numbers came out for the previous week, and more than 4.4 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week, according to the Labor Department. And this is a signal that the tidal wave of job losses continues to grow during the coronavirus pandemic. This brings the total to 26.5 million jobs that have been lost in 5 weeks. 26.5 million jobs lost in 5 weeks. It's the 5th straight week that job losses were measured in the millions. From March 15th to April 18th, 26.5 million people have probably been laid off or furloughed. The number of jobs lost in that brief span effectively erased all jobs created after the 2008 financial crisis, meaning going back to 2010. I want you to understand the gravity of this, but also the hypocrisy of it. In 5 weeks, under Donald Trump, this unstable genius that thinks you can use ultraviolet light on the human body to kill coronavirus. Now, just 2 months ago, he was in a meeting with all the doctors and Dr. Anthony Fauci. He asked them, why can't you use the flu vaccine to immunize people against coronavirus? They're sitting there looking at him like he's crazy, because those are 2 different viruses. In 5 weeks, the big businessman who's supposed to make America great again and bring back manufacturing and bring back all the jobs, and we're going to have so many wins, you're going to say, Mr. Trump, I'm tired of winning. In 5 weeks, he's lost all of the job gains, all the jobs created since 2010. Imagine that. Now, let me ask you a question. And I know we have white listeners. We appreciate our white listeners on 9:10 AM to Superstation WFDF. But anybody can answer this question. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. You don't have to have a PhD in political science to answer this question. What do you think would happen if President Obama lost 26 million jobs in 5 weeks? What do you think when you can't lose 26? Can't no Negro lose 26 million jobs in 5 weeks and still have a job? I mean, let's be honest. Forget who you voted for. Let's just be honest. How is it that people are not calling for Trump to be impeached or removed from office? Now, a few people are floating the 25th Amendment. because he's mentally unstable. But you know, and I know, I don't care whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat, I don't care whether you don't vote, whether you belong to the NAACP, you know and I know, can't no Negro in this country lose 26 million jobs in 5 weeks and still have a job. I mean, this is like the height of white privilege. You know, if that happened, people would be out in the street marching for President Obama to be removed from office. That's not happening right now with Trump. I mean, just think about this. So you got people you have people lining up. They show on MSNBC people going to food banks in their cars, lined up for miles, never had to go to a food bank before. This is an example of how elections have consequences. So the new weekly total comes on top of 22 million Americans who had sought benefits in previous weeks, a volume that has overwhelmed state systems for processing unemployment claims because some of the state websites keep crashing. There's going to be millions more who file for unemployment. A lot of the people who are really unemployed, they can't file on the unemployment website because the website keeps crashing. So economists estimate the national unemployment rate sits between 15 and 20%, much higher than it was during the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009. It's going to get worse. CNBC had an article about a month ago, CNBC.com. They estimate that up to 47 million people are going to file for unemployment. Is that 26.5 million right now in 5 weeks? Elections have consequences, and this is destroying people's businesses, especially African-American owned businesses. Remember Donald Trump asked black people, what the hell do you have to lose? I told you last week, the answer is everything. The unemployment rate at the peak of the Great Depression was about 25%. We may even reach that. The unemployment rate at the peak of the Great Depression in the 1930s was 25%. It's estimated we're at 15 to 20% right now. What the hell do you have to lose? I'll tell you on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, everybody, share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. We're on break right here. Hey, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with us. And we have, let's see. So a lot of people are looking for health products right now. And Sage and Elm Apothecary.com, Sage and Elm Apothecary.com can help you with that. They have a wide variety of products, over 60 different beautiful handcrafted soaps, natural toothpaste, hydrating oils, deodorants, face masks, shampoos, conditioners, and so much more. Their holistic approach to self-care formulate their product inventory. They're proud to serve their community of plant-based product supporters and offerings for the entire family. At their website, sageandelmapothecary.com, APOTHECARY. You can find out about their pop-up shops and upcoming vending events later in the year. Use the promo code AHNSPRING20, AHNSPRING20, and get 20% off your order, and let them know you found out about this from the African History Network. That's sageandelmapothecary.com. Okay, now a lot of people may not be traveling by plane right now, but you know at some point you will. And you're looking for leather travel accessories, okay? And blacklionleather.com carries leather travel accessories, and they allow you to carry your culture with you. They are an African-American owned company. They provide unique, okay, then we're back from the break. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, April 26th, 2020. And we're live right now. Calling number is area code 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And I think we're also on 910 AM Superstation's Facebook page also. I just emailed you the information also, JT. And I emailed you a couple clips as well. Okay, so right before the break, I was giving you an update on what's going on with coronavirus and how it is destroying the economy. And we see there's a push by some Republican governors to prematurely open back up the economy. And let's see, are we on? We broadcasting on Facebook? JT, let me know. We see there's a push for them to prematurely open back up the economy. We see Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia is doing this, and according to the guidelines from the 3 phases from the Trump coronavirus task force for reopening the economy, restarting the economy, you have to have 14 consecutive days of declining numbers when it comes to coronavirus cases. State of Georgia does not have that. Okay, so right before the break, we were talking about 4.4 million jobs lost this past last week. Okay, the numbers come out every Thursday morning about 8:30 a.m. And Washington Post has a really good article dealing with this. 4.4 million Americans sought jobless benefits last week as economic pain continues across the United States. As economic pain continues across the United States. So let's continue with that, and we have a lot of other topics to get to as well. All right. Okay, so the new weekly jobless claims figure came around economists' predictions, which were expected to be staggering but not growing, which is a small mercy, said Julia Pollack, a labor economist at ZipRecruiter. For comparison, 5.2 million people filed for unemployment claims for the week ending April 11th. Now, what we're seeing is that you have more white-collar workers who are filing for unemployment now. As the coronavirus began spreading in the United States early this year, many businesses rapidly began to close. Hotels, restaurants, and airlines were hit particularly hard, but few businesses were immune from the economic toll. The problems have only worsened each week as more Americans cut back on spending. More businesses have cut workers because income has fallen so sharply. Now, see, once again, this is why you have to have somebody who has good judgment, understands how the economy works, knows how tariffs work, knows the difference between noble, N-O-B-L-E, meaning good, and Nobel, which is the guy's last name who the Nobel Peace Prize is named after. Okay? I mean, come on. People, come on. I mean, let's just be honest. Okay, I don't care who you. Well, I do care who you voted for, but this ain't about who you voted for. I mean, at some point, we just got to tell the truth. This fool's lost his mind. Okay, if you voted for him, all right. He's lost his mind. At some point, you have to admit you made a mistake. Okay, at some point, especially if you're unemployed right now, you voted for this fool, and you going back and forth to the food bank. Okay, I don't know what to tell you, but at some point, you have to realize, okay, you know what? We made a mistake. It's obvious he never read the U.S. Constitution. He just found out about the 10th Amendment 2 weeks ago. 10th Amendment gives states rights. That's part of the Bill of Rights, ratified December 1791. The 10th Amendment, the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution were not part of the original Constitution that was signed September 17, 1787, ratified 1788. That comes in 1791. That's known as the Bill of Rights. Go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, or archives.gov, and read the U.S. Constitution. This is why I tell people we don't understand history, don't understand law. We'll get into this some in the second hour, and I really deal with this when I do my presentations, dealing with 6 principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. So you don't want to miss our second hour. All right, so Julia Pollock said many businesses quickly cut to the bone when they realized how the pandemic would gut sales. Now, many of the new layoffs stem from businesses like news organizations, like media, news organizations, and technology companies that were not directly affected by people staying home, but are suffering the consequences of vanishing advertising revenue and paid subscriptions. It's hitting a lot of white collar workers. It's not just hitting African Americans who are on the front line, some of them being sidelined, some of them having to file for unemployment, or some of their jobs are in jeopardy, like those working at the post office. And Donald Trump and Republicans want to privatize the post office, and 21% of the employees at the post office are African American. And this jeopardizes African Americans' jobs, their careers, their lives, their livelihood, children who are in college, their mortgages. What the hell do you have to lose? The correct answer, Alex, would be everything. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. How's everybody doing on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network? Let's see, we've got Terry and Tony, Shauna, Renee, Sis Ray Lay. That's Sister Sunshine. She thinks I don't know who she is. From back in the day when I used to do my blog talk radio show. Alberto, Gloria, just a few of the people listening, watching us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And let me post the call-in number here. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's continue here. This is a really good article from Washington Post. NBCnews.com has one as well. U.S. jobless claims reached 26 million since coronavirus hit, wiping out all gains since 2008 recession. In 5 weeks, all of the job gains from the past 10 years have been wiped out. Okay. So we see, Julia Pollock said, we see declines across every major industry and state, although the declines hit industries at different times. Meanwhile, consumer spending, the engine behind the longest economic expansion in U.S. history, that started under the black guy, in case y'all forgot. Just so we understand. All these people want to talk about what President Obama didn't do and all this stuff. He ain't do no stupid stuff like this. He ain't lose 26 million jobs in 5 weeks. Tell you that. I mean, we can compare policies. We can compare his policies to Trump. We can compare his performance to Trump. He ain't do no stupid stuff like this. He also didn't tell you to inject Clorox in your behind either. He ain't do nothing like that either. Okay. So, meanwhile, consumer spending, the engine behind the longest economic expansion in U.S. history, has evaporated. If they are still operating, many offices are working with skeleton staffs and staring down months of dismal revenue. The White House and Congress have tried to intervene, but with limited impact so far. New funding for small businesses in a $2.2 trillion March emergency spending package quickly dried up in the face of overwhelming demand, prompting the U.S. Senate to expand funding by $310 billion this past Tuesday. The House of Representatives passed it on Thursday. Trump signed it into law Friday morning. And we also saw that a lot of corporations who are publicly traded got some of this money. They're being shamed and they're giving it back. Ruth Chris Steakhouse, Shake Shack, shaking down the government for taxpayer dollars. And they got caught. And so now they're giving it back because they don't want people they don't want a backlash from consumers. Right? So $310 billion. So it was a $448 billion bill. There was another article I had dealing with that because I talked about that this past week also. Washington Post had a good article dealing with that as well. You got to watch my broadcast throughout the week because I go deep into this information. And I did one on Thursday. It's also an audio podcast format. If you go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and click on listen to podcasts, wherever you get your audio podcast from. search for the African History Network show, because we have an audio podcast there as well. Okay, so there's also an additional $60 billion for a separate small business emergency grant and loan program. So even with all the new government spending, hopes for a sharp economic rebound are fading, overtaken by the public fear of going back to restaurants, movie theaters, schools, and gyms, the growing possibility of a W-shaped recovery, okay? Not just a straight recovery going in a diagonal line going up, but a recovery that has peaks and valleys, okay? A W-shaped recovery in which a resurgence of the virus or a spike in defaults and bankruptcies triggers another downturn in the economy. This has analysts reframing what a reopened or rehabilitated economy might look like. This year defies historical comparison. In the year 2020, 28.9 million people have filed for unemployment benefits. Halfway through the fourth month of the year, the figure has already eclipsed the full totals of every year except 1982, when you had 30.4 million people who filed for unemployment in 1982, and the year 2009, at the beginning of the Great Recession, when you had 29.8 million people who filed for unemployment. But at this rate, it will overtake both within a week or so. So we're going to exceed that. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Now, employers are also unlikely to be hiring at the same levels they were hiring before the pandemic, because each month there was between 6 to 7 million unfilled jobs. If you go and Google that, you'll see numerous articles written about that. I've talked about that before. You go to BLS.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is Department of Labor. You read the numbers that they have there for each month, the unemployment numbers. They'll tell you this. That's largely evaporated. In 3 states, Hawaii, Kentucky, and the state of Michigan. In 3 states, Hawaii, Kentucky, and the state of Michigan, about 1 in 4 workers have filed for unemployment benefits in the past 5 weeks. That's 25% of the workforce in Michigan. Donald Trump won Michigan in 2016 by 10,704 votes. 10,704 votes, 0.2 of a percentage point. Jill Stein got 50,000 votes out of Michigan. The interstate cross-checking system knocked 54,000 people off the voter rolls in Michigan. That's 104,000 gone right there. The interstate. See, a lot of people don't even see. A lot of people talk about the voter suppression that took place in 2016. They won't talk about the interstate cross-checking system that was used by Republicans, largely in states that had Republican-dominated state legislatures and a Republican governor. That knocked 1.1 million people off the voter rolls. See, we really have to do an autopsy on what happened in 2016. The rapid voter suppression, the backlash of Shelby County versus Holder, 2013 U.S. Supreme Court case that gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. So the 2016 presidential election was the first presidential election in 50 years where you didn't have the full weight, the full power of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that most people don't even understand. There were 800 because of Shelby County versus Holder U.S. Supreme Court case, and this deals with understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. There were 868 fewer polling places in the 2016 presidential election. The majority of them were in communities that are heavily African American and Hispanic. Today, there are 1,700 fewer polling places to vote at in America. That ties back to 2013 U.S. Supreme Court case Shelby County versus Holder. We have to understand law and history and policies. Then you had Russian intervention. You had a disinformation campaign from the Russian Internet Research Agency. They took out 3,500 ads on Facebook alone. It reached 126 million people. Go read volume 1 of the Mueller report, especially pages 22 through 40, which deals with how Russians targeted African Americans with a disinformation campaign. If we haven't figured out what happened in 2016, then it can happen in 2020 because it worked in 2016. If it's 4 years later and you still haven't figured this out, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, keep listening to the African History Network show, you're going to find out. But, I mean, we really have to study what happened in 2016. Because as FBI Director Christopher Wray, as others have said, as Robert Mueller, they said the Russians haven't left, they're still here. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. JT, we have any callers? Okay. Phone lines are open, so if you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600. Okay, so we see jobless losses in 3 states, Hawaii, Kentucky, and Michigan. 1 in 4 workers have filed for unemployment in the past 5 weeks. Read the rest of this article from the Washington Post, okay? I mean, there's a lot here. 4.4 million Americans sought jobless benefits last week as economic pain continued across the United States. Then NBCnews.com had one also from April 23rd, 2020. U.S. jobless claims reached 26 million since coronavirus hit, wiping out all gains since 2008 recession. That's at NBCnews.com. In just 1 month, all gains since the Great Recession have disappeared, according to new data released Thursday by the Department of Labor. The economy had created around 22 million jobs since 2010. During a historic decade of economic expansion that came to an abrupt end in February. Okay, so read the rest of that article. All right, now, let's see here. Let's go to, okay, let's see. Okay, we're coming up on a break in about 15 minutes. All right, so Thursday's press conference, right? Thursday's coronavirus press conference. You know, I'm sitting there watching this, and Trump starts to pontificate after seeing a great presentation. After they did a presentation dealing with the half-life of coronavirus when exposed to light and bleach and alcohol, things like this, right? Then he starts to pontificate. You know, let's do this here. We have clip 2. We have clip 2 queued up, JT. Which clip is it? Clip 1. Clip 1. Trump faces fallout. We got clip 1 queued up. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to clip 1. Trump faces fallout from dangerous comments about consuming disinfectants to treat coronavirus. Let's go to this clip.
This was a display of extraordinary ignorance and arrogance that should never have come out of the mouth of the President of the United States. He was clearly not joking. Not only did he look at Bill Bryan from Homeland Security, he also was looking at Dr. Debbie Birx, who I thought was just going to fall off her chair from disbelief. I can't even imagine what was going through her mind. But nonetheless, there we are, a president being extraordinarily inappropriate and dangerous, actually. You know, anybody now who ends up having ill effects from following any part of what the president was recommending is now on his shoulders. A lot of things now that he's going to be responsible for in terms of the failures of his administration to act appropriately in face of this pandemic, really. But adding this to it is a surreal, bizarre, and ignorant display of whatever it is that's going through Donald Trump's really distorted mind right now about what to do about the pandemic. But I think it's worth repeating again that these are dangerous recommendations that the president made, and people should stay away from them.
Absolutely. He has no qualifications to say this whatsoever. And the problem is, Dr. Moise, you know, folks like you who are an ER doctor end up dealing with the consequences of Donald Trump, who has a cult of personality, meaning anything he says is taken in as the God's honest truth, literally God's honest truth, by his supporters. Here is a caller to a conservative radio show. This was just on Friday. This was yesterday. Take a listen.
Maybe they could make some sort of vape that was healthy for you. You know, that would atomize the chemicals into your lungs and could blow it out your nose, you know. But thinking outside the box is what we have to do now, and no one seems to want to do it. They just, I don't know if I'm crazy, but
no, you're not. No, Zach, you're not crazy. And bingo, you said the word, you said the phrase, and thank you for that call. Thinking outside the box. That's literally what the president was doing yesterday. And that's what good chief executive does.
No, you're not crazy. I think a lot of people would beg to differ. We have reports last month. A man died after taking chloroquine in an attempt to prevent coronavirus. The man and his wife thought the ingredient used to treat sick fish could prevent the disease. The man's wife ended up in an ICU. There was an interview with our own Vaughn Hilliard in which she said, Trump kept saying it was basically pretty much a cure. What would be your message to the American public? She said, is what Vaughn asked. Oh, my God, don't take anything. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything that the president says and his people. Call your doctor. But before she got to that point, she ended up in an ICU where then she is now a risk to other people. Your thoughts, Dr. Moise?
I think that at this point, a lot of people are laughing at this whole situation. There are memes out on social media. What we have to realize here is that President Trump has a base. The base listens very intently to what he says and takes his messages very seriously. So now we're seeing that he's putting these inappropriate, dangerous messages out, and people are actually internalizing this and taking them seriously. You have, now you have situations where people in Maryland were, calling the hotline for coronavirus and actually asking about these supposed treatments that he spoke about. So, I don't think people realize the level of danger. I think a lot of people that see this will make sense of this and say, hey, of course, ingesting a disinfectant is not appropriate. But you have people out there that truly listen intently to the president and will follow what he says. And unfortunately, these, the fact that they're actually listening can be extremely dangerous to them. They could die from ingesting these disinfectants. This is not a joke.
Hey, JT, pause it right there. I sent you the wrong clip. Okay, that's from AM Joy. That's a good clip. I just sent you clip 3. Did you get that? Check your email, JT. I just sent you clip 3. That's the clip I want to play.
Yeah, I got it all set up.
Okay. Yeah, so I want to go to this one here. This is... I
need 25 seconds real quick.
You need 25 seconds? Okay, go ahead. I'll go ahead and set it up. So this is Trump faces fallout from dangerous comments about consuming disinfectants to treat coronavirus. This is from April 25th, MSNBC. The White House is scrambling to mitigate Donald Trump's suggestion that injecting or consuming something that should not be consumed or injected under any circumstances. Chris Hayes points out this is part of a pattern in which Trump looks for a magic bullet to save him. Let's see here. Okay, Trump looks for a magic bullet to save him and his reelection. Okay, let's see. Let's go to this clip.
Happy talk and spin. He pretended it was not happening. And when none of that worked and the government failed to protect us with inadequate testing, he turned his attention to finding some magic pill, some bolt from the blue cure that could make everything go away, that would make the economy and the stock market come back, that would get Donald Trump reelected. We now know this was not just idle speculation, it wasn't just hype. Behind the scenes, the Trump administration was trying to force the drug on Americans in contravention of scientific advice.
In a lot of ways, hydroxychloroquine is the ideal medicine.
At this point, it's come across as pretty much of a game changer.
I say it. What do you have to lose? I'll say it again. What do you have to lose? Take it.
The FDA is cautioning against using that drug outside of the hospital setting, outside of a clinical trial, due to the risk of heart rhythm problems. But here's the thing. The president has not given up on the idea of some magical solution because he is incapable of thinking about this as a long-term battle that requires strategy and care and competence and expertise. Nope. He still wants the magic bullet to save him and his reelection.
Yesterday's briefing, in which, again, he questioned whether or not it would be possible to use UV light, heat, these disinfectants to potentially treat COVID-19. And it has really been a controversy that he has been dealing with, that the White House has been dealing with.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that.
They knew immediately. They started texting, wondering where did he get this information? Why was he saying this?
There was some discussion about how different ailments can be treated with radiation. And what Aide said is that the president seemed to just conflate all of this and ad-lib at the podium in the White House briefing room.
Clorox also put out a statement warning people not to put its products into their bodies. And there were also warnings from the EPA and the CDC and the Surgeon General, who implored people to please always talk to your health provider first before administering any treatment medication to yourself or loved one.
And now you have the president telling people, well, maybe we should take, bleach or something, those disinfectants to treat this. It just, everything parents fear is in that statement. It's just, blood-curdling that someone would advocate this on television where kids could hear it.
They waited 12 hours before the new press secretary put out a statement, which essentially just blamed the media, said that we were taking the president's comments out of context, which we know that we weren't. But she didn't say, as you mentioned, that this was somehow sarcasm or the president didn't really mean it.
I should tell you that just today, Trump lied and said his initial comment was sarcastic, even though that's obviously not true because we all just saw the video there. And then he went ahead after lying and saying it was sarcastic and basically, once again said what he said yesterday. Maybe we check it out. I'm not a doctor, but, run it down.
I don't like to say people should stay in their own lane, but, it does take some technical expertise to understand how we can deliver therapies to people, and we shouldn't be talking about it casually.
We just want to underscore the fact that disinfectants should in no instance ever be used, injected in any way, shape, or form to treat any type of ailment, Chuck.
All right, so, that's from MSNBC. Check out that clip at msnbc.com. Trump faces fallout from dangerous comments about consuming disinfectants to treat coronavirus. That's from April 25th, 2020. That's at msnbc.com. We'll post a link here on the thread of the broadcast. That gives a good summary of what happened on Thursday and the fallout from it, okay? And then we saw Saturday and Sunday there was no coronavirus press conference. We see Trump tweeted that basically he was wondering why he doesn't miss a waste of his time, things like that. If it's a waste of your time, why'd you have something that were 2 hours, 2.5 hours? If it's a waste of your time, you didn't have to be there. Okay, so this is all backfiring on him. Okay, I know we're coming up here on the break. If we look at the latest numbers from Johns Hopkins, we see that you have 2.9 million, a little more than 2.9 million confirmed coronavirus cases worldwide. a little more than 206,000 deaths. Worldwide also, we see the U.S. Has the most number of coronavirus cases by far, a little more than 965,000, right about 966,000. And then we see in the U.S. we reached, unfortunately, 50,000 deaths this past Friday. The U.S. is almost at 55,000 deaths now associated with COVID-19. And also we see that there have been a total of 5.4 million tests conducted in the United States. When we look at the number recovered, we see that a total of 106,000 people, almost 107,000 people have recovered in the U.S. So you're looking at close to about 10%. And worldwide, we see that it's about 865,000, almost 866,000 who have recovered worldwide. Okay, go to arcgis.com, arcgis.com, and you have the tracking from Johns Hopkins University. They have some of the most accurate numbers. Okay, we also saw that the World Health Organization announced in the past couple of days that the World Health Organization clarified that people who have recovered from COVID-19 will probably have an antibody response protecting them from a protecting them from a second coronavirus infection, backing off an earlier statement that there was no evidence recovered patients gained immunity. Check out Washington Post for the updates, their live updates dealing with coronavirus. The World Health Organization clarified that people who have recovered from COVID-19 will probably have an antibody response protecting them from a second coronavirus infection, backing off an earlier statement that there was no evidence recovered patients gained immunity. At this point in time, we don't know exactly how long people will be protected, how long the antibodies will protect you from being reinfected again. Let's see, the first known person to die of COVID-19 in the United States passed away from a massive heart attack brought on by the disease, according to an autopsy report published by the San Francisco Chronicle. Now we also see that Donald Trump pushed back on reports that the White House that White House officials are discussing whether to replace Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar. Frustrations have grown over Alex Azar's handling of the coronavirus crisis, but Trump tweeted Sunday that such reports are quote-unquote fake news. We'll see. Okay, so go to WashingtonPost.com, also NBCNews.com. You can read the updates, the live updates dealing with coronavirus. Also, they had one dealing with what's his idiot's name? Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Now, we hear more and more stories about coronavirus spreading through meatpacking plants. Federal government issues new guidelines for meatpacking workers and employers as concerns mount. Let me know how much time we have before the break, JT. The Labor Department and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released new guidance for meatpacking and meat processing workers and employers as plants turn into infection hotspots amid the coronavirus pandemic and spark concerns that workers are not being protected. The guidance issued Sunday states that employers should configure work environments so that employees are spaced at least 6 feet apart in all directions, if quote-unquote, if possible. Additionally, the Center for Disease Control says companies should consider screening employees for coronavirus symptoms before they enter the workplace, for example, through temperature checks, and says workers should wear cloth face coverings in addition to practicing social distancing. Read the rest of this because this is huge. You have African Americans who work in meatpacking plants. You have immigrants who work in meatpacking plants. You have Hispanics. We know African Americans and Hispanics are deemed non-essential, are deemed essential workers, and on the front line. And you have, going back to March, there was an article from finance.yahoo.com that I talked about on one of my broadcasts. Coronavirus to impact low-wage black workers the most. Coronavirus to impact low-wage black workers the most. That's from March 12, 2020. There's another one from Black Enterprise, March 13th, 2020. The coronavirus will hit low-wage black workers the hardest. And we're seeing this is happening. Okay, we're coming up on a break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. The Superstation. Future Radio. Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, guys, stand by. We're on break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. A lot of people looking for a good book to read while they are quarantined at home. Author DeKalb Walcott Jr. is the author of Black Heroes of Fire, Black Heroes of Fire. And this book tells the story, the history of the first African-American fire company in Chicago. They were engine number 21. They were Chicago's first organized paid African-American firefighting company. Find out about their exploits and their heroism in the book Black Heroes of Fire. Is available right now at Amazon.com and also the website blackheroesoffire.com, blackheroesoffire.com. Okay, so we know that a lot of people want to get in shape, and a lot of people, some people have been gaining weight since they've been home more, and their children are at home more, things like this. Well, SheRanHerselfFit.com can help you with that, okay? SheRanHerselfFit.com is a website that has good tips, and also it has, they sell workout gear for women who want to get in shape. The founder of She Ran Herself Fit, her name is Felicia. Felicia lost over 200 pounds by changing her diet and running. Now, running may not be your motivation, but find what drives you to be fit. Visit their website, SheRanHerselfFit.com. You can purchase their apparel, get their tips, and let them know you found out about this from the African History Network. Okay, so we're coming back from break here in just a minute. Okay, stand by, everybody. And in the second hour, I want to get into this discussion dealing with the policies of Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. Now that we have a presumptive nominee, we need to analyze this, okay? And we see how destructive Trump is. We see how destructive Trump is to the economy. And I have one other clip I want to get to also here. How's everybody doing? Let's see here. We have Philip, Latonya, Tony, Chana, just a few of the people watching on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Also watch me on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Okay. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also PayPal.me/the AHN Show, PayPal.me/the AHN Show, also through PayPal. And at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Just click on the yellow donate button right on the home page. All right, let's see here. Okay. All right, I have a couple of other updates. There's so much going on, a lot of stories we're going to get to. We see that we have African American mayors who are pushing back on their Republican governors, trying to open back up the states, trying to open back up the economy. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM the Superstation Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We are in our second hour. It is Sunday, April 26, 2020, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Be sure to also sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter also. Okay. Let's go back to some of the updates that are taking place. So Washington Post has a really good one. This deals with meatpacking plants. Okay, so read this. Federal government issues new guidelines for meatpacking workers and employers as concerns mount. Okay, and then let's see. DC numbers suggest children face hospitalization risk from coronavirus. DC numbers, Washington DC numbers suggest children face hospitalization risk from coronavirus. An analysis by doctors at Children's National Hospital in Washington DC calls into question the commonly held and comforting assumption that children seem to escape the novel coronavirus's more serious effects. Roberta DiBiase, the hospital's infectious disease division chief, said Friday, quote, "We have been ready, but frankly surprised. We are actually having a significant number of admissions and critical care admissions," end quote. Although from a small sample size, the data from Children's National suggests that some kids may not be as immune to the virus as once assumed. Between March 15th and April 22nd, Children's National saw 105 children who were sick with the coronavirus. 28 required hospitalization, or about 27%. DiBiase said, Roberta DiBiase said, the hospital has yet to see a fatality related to the virus. Right? We know here in Detroit, 5-year-old Skylar lost her life related to COVID-19. There was a ride for Skylar that a lot of people in law enforcement were having. I think it was Friday this past week. So, I mean, these are tragedies that are happening all across the country, all throughout communities, but especially afflicting African-American communities. And it's exposing institutional racism. It's exposing health disparities. So, you know, stay tuned. You're going to see a lot more of this, but this is calling attention to the need for more health care, for more equity when it comes to health care. All this deals with economics, all this deals with policies, etc. There was one, I want to get to this one from dealing with Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, because if Andrew Gillum had become governor of Florida, he would handle all this much more responsibly than Governor Ron DeSantis is. DeSantis and Florida, doctors urge non-COVID-19 patients to go to hospital as people with serious conditions delay care. Florida leaders and doctors are trying to convey that hospitals are safe for COVID-19 patients to enter, as Governor Ron DeSantis, who's a Republican, this weekend said he will soon announce an end to the state's ban on elective surgeries. Health officials said Sunday that hospitalization rates have decreased in recent days, and that parts of the state are now on the other side of the coronavirus pandemic. And Governor Ron DeSantis said he would look further into how to reopen the state. DeSantis joins other governors moving to bring back elective medical procedures after pausing them with a March 20th executive order. Quote, elective procedures, I think when people hear that, they think it's like, oh, you know, I'm going to get like some type of cosmetic surgery or something. These elective procedures really do affect patients' health, Governor Ron DeSantis said Saturday during a news briefing at Cleveland Clinic, Florida. Quote, you're talking about screenings, you're talking about things that are really important. I think we need to move in that direction, end quote. Now, DeSantis said he will announce the move shortly, but that he wants to review task force findings and consult with other experts. He and doctors noted a decline in the number of patients arriving with cardiac problems and other serious health issues, a nationwide phenomenon, as some people say they are afraid to go to the hospital. Wael Barsoum, B-A-R-S-O-U-M, the president and chief executive of the Cleveland Clinic, Florida, pointed Saturday to a study by colleagues that found a 38% decrease in patients presenting to the hospital with symptoms of stroke or heart attack. Quote, that is a problem, and we need to make sure people understand hospitals are as safe as they can be, end quote, Barsoum said. So you have a lot of people who have all types of ailments and they're afraid to go to the hospital. I saw this article from the Washington Post. Patients with heart attacks, strokes, and even appendicitis vanish from hospitals. It's not that they're not sick. It's not that they don't need medical attention. They're afraid to go to the hospital because they're afraid there are COVID-19 patients there and they'll get sicker. This is from April 19th, 2020. Read this article from the Washington Post. Patients with heart attacks, strokes, and even appendicitis vanish from hospitals. Okay. Do we have any callers, JT? I thought I heard something clicking on your end. Okay, just a second here. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Leonard, line 2. Leonard, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for holding. Tell us where you're calling from.
Detroit.
Detroit. Okay, go ahead with your question or comment.
I had listened, saw this stuff from the Mirror in the UK, and it was saying basically that the United States, through something called NSD, which I don't know about, had given $3.7 million to that lab in China, and that the lady that Miss Zhang Li, who was supposed to have 16 years of studying coronaviruses, said in her text that 3 times that she was afraid that the virus would get out of the laboratory and stuff. I've since heard a little snipe of this on ABC and on, I hate to say this, I hit Bush Limbaugh going by, and he was saying the same thing, but he didn't give any thing that Trump was responsible for.
Who did you say, Rush Limbaugh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've talked about
the government.
They've talked about the Chinese doctor, some on MSNBC. Richard Engel has done a couple of specials dealing with the origins of coronavirus, and recently I saw something dealing with the doctor that you mentioned. You know, now I don't rely on reporting from the Daily Mirror. I think it's the public. I don't rely on reporting from them. I'll cross-reference that. But some of that, I don't know about the $3.7 million. But some of what you're talking about her saying that she was afraid that the virus would get out. Yeah, I have seen that. Did you have any other questions? Go ahead.
And having been in the Marine Corps and had some training in chemical, biological, nuclear warfare, these are called vectors that they put out. And the bats that they were talking about came from the southern part of China, and Wuhan is in the middle part of China. You know, so they had to bring it from thousands of miles, you know. It's just
bats don't just stay. Bats don't necessarily stay put. 1, 2. If people were consuming bats, also, you know, we're not sure where they got the bats from. But one thing, CNN had a really good article that talked about how this is from probably 2 months ago. It talked about how coronavirus can stand higher temperatures in your body because the body temperatures of bats are much higher. The name of the article, people should check this out. This is from CNN.com. Bats are not to blame for coronavirus. Humans are. bats are not to blame for coronavirus. Humans are. This is from March 20th, 2020 from CNN.com. And I think this is the correct one. It talked about the, the body temperature. Zoologists and disease experts have told CNN that changes to human behavior, the destruction of natural habitats, coupled with the huge number of fast-moving people now on Earth. Let me see, where is bats? Okay, bats are the only mammal that can fly, allowing them to spread in large numbers from one community over a wide area. Scientists say this means they can harbor a large number of pathogens or diseases. Flying also requires a tremendous amount of activity for bats, which has caused their immune systems to become very specialized. Quote, when they fly, they have a peak body temperature that mimics a fever, end quote, said Andrew Cunningham, professor of wildlife epidemiology at the Zoological Society of London. Quote, it happens at least twice a day with bats when they fly out to feed and then they return to roost. As soon as the pathogens that have evolved in bats have evolved to withstand these peaks of body temperature, end quote. So Cunningham said this poses a potential problem when these diseases cross into another species. In humans, for example, a fever is a defense mechanism designed to raise the body temperature to kill a virus. A virus that has evolved in a bat will probably not be affected by a higher body temperature, he warned. So when you study a lot of COVID-19 patients, and especially some of those that die, they talk about a high fever that they have, and their bodies can't stand the high fever. Well, a fever is your body's defense mechanism to raise your body temperature to kill a virus. But with COVID-19, because it's believed to develop in bats, and because bats have a higher body temperature, right? It doesn't work. In a lot of people, it's not working like that. People should read this article. I read this back when it came out March 20, because I've been studying coronavirus since end of January. While people were talking about Gail and Oprah and Jada Pinkett Smith and Snoop Dogg and Kobe, all that stuff, right? I didn't do no video dealing with that. I was studying coronavirus towards the end of January, and I was dealing with the impeachment of Donald Trump. Read this article from CNN.com. Bats are not to blame for coronavirus. Humans are. Okay, man. All right. Thanks for calling. Keep listening, Leonard, okay? Okay, thanks. All right, peace. All right, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We'll post this link here on the thread of the broadcast. All right, so let me fast forward here because we're already in our second hour. And after the show, we're going to continue on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. I have to get to this second clip here. We'll go to this one here in just a minute. On the other side of the break, because we're coming up on a break in about 5 minutes. We'll go to Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, was interviewed by Reverend Al Sharpton on Politics Nation. So we'll go to that in when we come back from the break. But I want to talk about Mayor Keisha Lance-Bottoms of Atlanta. TheGrio.com had an article, and other news outlets had an article. Mayor receives text calling her the N-word. Shut up and reopen Atlanta. Shut up and reopen Atlanta. You have a lot of African American mayors who are in states where you have Republican governors. And these mayors are against the governors opening back up the state. They're saying it's too early. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance-Bottoms received an outpouring of support after tweeting that she received a racist message while she was spending time with her daughter. The message texted to the mayor was vulgar and used the racial slur to address her. After stating that the message came through while her daughter was standing over her shoulder, she added she would be praying for the person who sent her the ugly note. Lastly, she added a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., quote, conscience, stupidity, or sheer ignorance. Now, celebrities like Holly Robinson Peete and tweeted their support of the mayor, adding that her leadership is vital right now. Mayor Keisha Lance-Bottoms has openly disagreed with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, who stole the election from Stacey Abrams. We all remember that. She disagrees with his decision to reopen many businesses in the state of Georgia, including hair and nail salons and bowling alleys. She said, quote, "I feel that we are still empowered to use our voices and to use our common sense, and that's what I will continue to do as mayor," she said to Atlanta's Channel 11 Alive. Now, she is not the only one who does not agree with Governor Brian Kemp. Even Donald Trump, Mr. Ultraviolet Light and injected with disinfectant, he also publicly stated that he, quote, strongly, end quote, disagrees that Georgia is ready to lift its statewide quarantine. In response to this, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp stated, quote, "We've had conversations with the White House about our data, what we're doing. They're doing the same with a lot of governors around the country," end quote. Now, Mayor Keisha Lance-Bottoms was elected mayor in Atlanta of Atlanta in 2017 in a runoff election. Mayor Keisha, as she is affectionately known, has rallied the support of the city's numerous entertainment stars. Rapper Killer Mike expressed yesterday that he will not be reopening his barbershop, the Swag Shop, despite the governor's edict to reopen the state. Now, that was thegrio.com. Check out this article here from the Grio. Mayor receives text calling her the N-word, shut up and reopen Atlanta. That's from April 23rd, 2020. Then the following day, April 24th, there was another article from the Grio. Atlanta mayor says her son also received racist text. White supremacy is a sickness. Okay, so check out that article also from thegrio.com. And then there was another one from the Grio that talks that Georgia leaders say reopening state is an attack on black people. Georgia leaders says reopening state is an attack on black people. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, all right, how's everybody doing? Stand by. We're going to wrap up these couple of topics. Then I'm going to get into the main topic. We're going to look at the policies of Bernie Sanders and the policies of Joe Biden. African American business owners, supposed to name your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. The documentary Wilmington on Fire tells the story of the Wilmington Massacre of 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina, before the Rosewood Massacre of Black Wall Street and the Greenwood, before the Rosewood Massacre of 1923, before the attack on Black Wall Street in June of 1921, there was the Wilmington Massacre of 1898. Check out the fantastic documentary from director Christopher Everett at the website WilmingtonOnFire.com. WilmingtonOnFire.com is available on DVD and also streaming on Vimeo. The documentary Wilmington on Fire. A lot of people are looking for healthy products right now. You want healthy soaps and natural toothpaste. Sage and Elm Apothecary.com has these products for you. They create unique products, especially with you in mind. They use simple ingredients such as whole fruits, herbs, and vegetables. Each product crafted offers a unique plant-based experience. They have over 60 different beautifully handcrafted soaps, natural toothpaste, hydrating oils, deodorants, face masks, shampoos, conditioners, and so much more. Visit their website, sageandelmapothecary.com. That's APOTHECARY.com, and place your order today. Use the promo code AHNSPRING20, AHNSPRING20. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM the Superstation WFDF. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, April 26th, 2020. We are live. Calling numbers area code 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. We're broadcasting on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network. Be sure to follow us there. Turn on notifications so you know when I go live. Also follow me on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep on YouTube, and subscribe there and turn on notifications so you know when we go live. Okay, so right before the break, I was talking about this article from thegrio.com. Georgia leaders say reopening state is attack on black people. So you have Georgia governors, you have African Americans. I say not Georgia governors. You have some mayors in the state of Georgia. You have African American leaders who are against Governor Brian Kemp opening up the state of Georgia for business as usual. Black leaders in Georgia believe that reopening businesses in the state of Georgia in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic is an attack on African Americans. Governor Brian Kemp allowed some businesses to reopen this past Friday, which was April 24th, that have been shut down since he issued a stay-at-home order April 23rd to combat the spread of COVID-19. To date, the southern state has more than 21,500 confirmed cases of coronavirus and more than 870 deaths. Just 2 weeks later, gyms, salons, barbershops, bowling alleys, and churches are once again opening their doors. Just 2 weeks later, gyms, salons, hair salons, barbershops, bowling alleys, and churches are once again opening their doors. However, not everyone is happy about the premature reopening. Even Donald Trump, who said he wanted the economy started, quote unquote, more than anyone, urged Governor Brian Kemp to reconsider. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance-Bottoms provided statistics in a Good Morning America interview that Georgia's case had not slowed enough to reopen. She also said that she did not feel opening up the economy. She also said that she didn't feel opening up the economy was is it irresponsible or responsible? Let's see. They have quote irresponsible here, but I'm not sure she meant to say. I'm not sure if they got that right. She said Georgia, 14th highest infection, 7th lowest testing rate, less economic resilient, and thousands of low-wage workers already forced to risk their lives to make a living, weakened health care with closed rural hospitals, no Medicaid expansion, and a doctor shortage. Reopened, dangerously incompetent, she tweeted. You had a lot of Republican governors that chose not to do the Medicaid expansion when it came to the Affordable Health Care Act. Once again, this is an example of how elections have consequences and how politics impacts every aspect of your life, to the water you drink, to the air you breathe, to the food you eat. And politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. They have a statement here from Reverend Jamal Bryant, senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia. He declared in a Facebook Live video that Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's decision was motivated by greed. He claimed Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's disregard for black lives was, quote, leaving us to slaughter, end quote, in the video that's been seen more than 1 million times. Then also Mitch McGee, co-owner of Distinctive Cuts, K-U-T-Z, in Atlanta, described Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's directive as an attack to CNN. He noted that most of the places reopening draw large African American gatherings, a group that has been disproportionately affected by the deadly coronavirus. He said, quote, it seems like it's an attack on us. It seems like it's an attack on us. Those places are all in our community where we live on top of one another. He said, I have a right to be paranoid because our people are dying more than whites. Read this full article from thegrio.com because we're running out of time here. This is Georgia leaders say reopening state is attack on black people. This is from April 24th, 2020. Now, I saw an article, I think it was from Politico. I'm going to try to pull it up here. And this dealt with how Republican governors are trying to reopen the states so people have to go back to work, to reduce the amount of money that has to be paid in unemployment claims. Okay, Vice.com had this article. GOP governors will push workers off unemployment by reopening early. This is from Vice.com, VICE. GOP governors will push workers off unemployment by reopening early. The Department of Labor confirmed to Vice.com that workers who refuse to return to work out of a general fear for their safety will lose their CARES Act unemployment benefits. That's the $2.2 trillion coronavirus stimulus bill. Okay? If Republican governors in states like Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina have announced plans to begin reopening their states' economies despite warnings by health officials that it's too early to do so. The decisions mean that businesses may soon start calling people back into work before they feel safe, creating a coronavirus-specific dilemma. If people in those states are offered their jobs back but refuse to take them back out of a fear for their safety, they will likely no longer qualify for unemployment benefits, even though they're taking the same precautions as people one state over. The Department of Labor's website explicitly states that, quote, voluntarily deciding to quit your job out of a general concern about exposure to COVID-19 does not make you eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. Pandemic unemployment assistance, end quote. A Department of Labor spokesperson confirmed to Vice.com that employees cannot continue to collect pandemic unemployment insurance if they refuse to, quote, return to work out of general safety concerns, end quote. This is an example of how elections have consequences. I guarantee you, if Stacey Abrams was the governor of Georgia, she would not be trying to force people back to work in unsafe conditions, and she would not be trying to force open back up the economy, and they have not had 14 consecutive days of declining coronavirus cases. I guarantee you, if Andrew Gillum had become governor of the great state of Florida, he would reopen the state more responsibly and not the way Governor Ron DeSantis is. They're going to get, a lot of people are going to get sick behind this, and they're going to get some people killed. This is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And here you have, once again, now, we just saw here in the state of Michigan with, I hate to say his name, Governor Rick Snyder, right? How with Flint, Michigan, that was putting profit over people. These are Republican policies. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I study history, I study law, I study policies and the effect of policies. Flint, Michigan was an example of people putting profit over people. Republican policies. Because that was the takeover of the state of Flint, Michigan. Okay, and then you had the power strip from city council. And when you go research this, and CNN had some good reporting on this, all they had to do when the city of Flint wanted to have their own water system, they were getting water from the Detroit water system. So they stopped getting water from the Detroit water system and started getting it from the Flint River source temporarily while they worked on getting their own water system. The water, everybody in Flint knew that water was polluted and toxic, things like this. in the Flint River source. The water in the Flint River was 19 times more corrosive than the water coming from the Detroit water system. All they had to do was to treat the water in Flint, Michigan from the Flint River source. All they had to do was treat it with an anti-corrosive agent, which would have cost somewhere between $150 to $200 a day to treat the water properly. They didn't do that because they didn't want to spend that type of money. What happened was when this water that was 19 times more corrosive than the water from the Detroit water source, when this water went through lead pipes, it removed the protective coating which was inside the lead pipes that kept the lead from leaching into the water. It stripped that protective coating away, which allowed lead to leach into the water. Now, all the pipes in Flint are not lead. It's about 50% of the pipes that were lead. In Flint, Michigan, is about 57% African American. You have a lot of poor white people that live in Flint also. But that's an example of putting profit over people. This right here, that Governor Ron DeSantis is doing, and the governor of Tennessee, and the governor of South Carolina, and the governor of the state of Georgia is doing, these Republican governors, this is putting profit over people. So the Department of Labor's website explicitly states that voluntarily deciding to quit your job out of a general concern about exposure to COVID-19 does not make you eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. A Department of Labor spokesperson confirmed to Vice.com that employees cannot continue to collect pandemic unemployment insurance if they refuse to return to work out of general safety concern. So if you fear for your life and think you're going to get COVID-19 if you go back to work and die, and you say, I don't want to go back, you lose your unemployment insurance. They also noted that, quote, when an individual is no longer eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance, they are also no longer eligible for the additional $600 a week in unemployment benefits that are coming from the federal government. Read this article here. This is from Vice.com. GOP governors will push workers off unemployment by reopening early. Okay, so this is what a lot of people suspect is behind this. Okay, you're trying to because it costs states. It's an expense for the state also to pay this unemployment insurance. Yeah, your employer pays part of it, but not all of it. Okay, so check out this article from Vice.com. All right, let's see here. And there was, being that we had this queued up, we know that Lysol, the maker of Lysol, warns against internal use of disinfectants after Donald Trump's comments. A spokesperson for the cleaning product company said it had a responsibility to give accurate information to the public. The manufacturer of Lysol, a disinfectant spray and cleaning product, issued a statement warning against any internal use after Donald Trump suggested that people could get an injection of the disinfectant that knocks coronavirus out in a minute. Okay, read this reporting from NBCnews.com. Lysol maker warns against internal use of disinfectants after Trump comments. Okay, so Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who's African American, was interviewed by Reverend Al Sharpton on Politics Nation, MSNBC, April 25th, 2020. And Garland Gilchrist talked about the effects of coronavirus as it pertains to the state's African American population. Okay, let me see. Let me get this clip here. And we know that the state of Michigan, African Americans make up 14% of the state of Michigan population, but make up 40% of the coronavirus deaths. Okay, and Garland Gilchrist, so Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who was portrayed actually on Saturday Night Live last night. It's a pretty funny skit, actually. And then they opened up with Brad Pitt portraying Dr. Anthony Fauci. Okay, so this was, I think, probably the second show where the cast is quarantined and the cast are doing this at home. It was much better than the first time they did it, because the first time that was the most horrible Saturday Night Live I've ever seen in the history of Saturday Night Live. Okay, but the one from last night was pretty funny. Okay, all right. Let's go to, we have this clip queued up, JT. Okay, let's go to this clip here.
Let me ask you this. What do you hope the task force can do to flatten the curve of racial disparities in terms of health care in general, and particularly the coronavirus?
Well, first of all, we have to act quickly because people are losing their lives every single day. And one of the things that's been so dangerous about this virus is that some of the people who are doing those jobs that are critical to protecting and sustaining life, people who are working at grocery stores or people who are bus drivers, these are people who have an increased risk of exposure to the virus. So we need to work to make sure they're getting exposed less, put protocols in place to help save them from that exposure. An example is if someone needs to go to the grocery store and they are fighting with persistent poverty, like a lot of black people are in the city of Detroit, you can't afford to buy hundreds of dollars of groceries and then not go back for a month. So you have to get on the bus and go to the grocery store every 2 or 3 days, exposing yourself, exposing the bus driver, exposing the grocers. And so we need to make sure that the safety net will work for these people to protect us from this virus.
Are you concerned about the November elections in terms of whether or not we may have a situation that we have the first national general election that has to be done in large part by mail-in voting? Do you think that Michigan will be prepared for that? Are there preparations being made now?
So provision is being made now, and thanks to the voters in Michigan, we have much more voting by mail since 2018, and we are better positioned than we would have been otherwise. But there needs to be more done. We need federal support for our local election administrators and our Secretary of State to be able to put in place the systems so that we can handle more and more absent voter ballots. And I think we can do that. And I think it's important because no one should have to choose between their life and their democracy. You shouldn't have to choose between exercising your right to vote and dying. You fought against that, Reverend Sharpton, when people were threatening to lynch people. And now there's a death threat that's called coronavirus. And we need to make sure that we are not putting people in its way by forcing them to go out in person like people had to do in Wisconsin.
You have a reputation of being hands-on and being on the ground. As you move around the state, are you seeing people with hope? Reverend Charles Williams and others tell me you're the guy that keeps your boot on the ground. Tell me what you're feeling from the citizens of Michigan.
I'll tell you this, Reverend Sharpton. I have been inspired by the people of Michigan, and it's because the irony of social distancing is that it reminds us how connected we truly are, how much we rely on one another. I'm talking to people who are saying they're calling their grandparents more often. They're checking up on their friends and family members. They're making sure that they're okay. They're delivering food in a safe way to make sure they can have what they need. It's inspiring because on the other side of this, Reverend Sharpton, we're going to check in on one another more often. We're going to say I love you a little harder. We're going to hug each other a little tighter as soon as it's safe to do so. And that is going to be the bright sunshine that is the morning after this stormy night. That inspires me. That motivates me to make sure we have everything that we need to do in place right now so that we can get through this. And we can because we can work together in a way that we never have.
Well, we must get through it, and it's going to be a very hard task after it to rebuild and really restructure. It will not be easy, nor will it be a quick process to rebuild after the damage of this pandemic. But I'm with you. I have faith we can do it. We've got to rise to the occasion. Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Reverend. God bless you.
Okay, pause it right there, JT. Hey, JT. Okay, yeah, pause it right there. Okay, so that was Michigan's own Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. He was interviewed by Reverend Al Sharpton on Politics Nation Saturday, April 25th, 2020. Watch that clip at msnbc.com. msnbc.com. And okay, so the name of that clip is Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist. There's a death threat called coronavirus. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, there's a death threat called coronavirus. That's from msnbc.com. And he was interviewed on Politics Nation on Saturday. Also, you know that you can listen to Reverend Al Sharpton Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF, Keeping It Real, his daily nationally syndicated radio show. And then after that, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., you can listen to the Michael Baston Show on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF. All right, so how's everybody doing? Everybody watching us on Facebook and YouTube. Let me get to this, and we're going to continue this discussion on Facebook after the show. So back on March 10th, I think it was March 10th when the primary took place in Michigan. I did a broadcast that day. I went and voted, voted that morning, and went and did a broadcast that day. And one of the things I talked about is Asian Americans do vote, because there was an Asian American behind me voting, and I dispelled all that nonsense that people are circulating around that Asians don't vote. That's just false. Okay, one. Two, I dealt with the policies of Mike Bloomberg, Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders. Okay, and how and a black agenda, how they would impact African Americans and a black agenda. Right. First of all, a black agenda is not what we wait on people to present to us. A black agenda is what we present to elected officials, is what we present to candidates. A black agenda comes out of an understanding of African history, African American history, our experiences, understanding policies, the impact policies have had on African Americans, how policies help create conditions. Movements come out of those conditions to fight against conditions. Policies are then put in place to address the movements that were created to address conditions. So you have a continuum. Okay, politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. This is what politics is. Politics impacts every aspect of our life, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. Okay, so I want to look at at these various policies from the candidates, and then also Joe Biden has expanded his policies, incorporating policies from Bernie Sanders as well as Senator Elizabeth Warren. Since the March 10th broadcast that I did, when we had the primary here in Michigan, we know, well, shortly before that, Mike Bloomberg dropped out of the race. He endorsed Joe Biden. You had a lot of people on social media say, well, Mike Bloomberg has a black agenda. He has the Greenwood Initiative. So we need to vote for Mike Bloomberg. Well, he dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. Senator Elizabeth Warren dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. So did Bernie Sanders. And then also President Barack Obama came out and endorsed Joe Biden as well. So theroot.com has probably the best analysis that I've seen of the various policies comparing the different candidates. This is from February 28th, 2020. Written by Michael Harriot, and I disagree with him on a number of different things, but this was a good article that he wrote. So what the Root did is they asked policy experts, legal scholars, and political pundits, all of whom were African American, to help them devise what's called a policy matrix. A policy matrix, and this policy matrix is used to grade each plan of the candidates, okay? And they grade each plan on a scale of 1 to 10. They have 10 categories. They look at economics, criminal justice, education, politics, comprehensiveness. How detailed is the candidate's plan? Does it contain specific proposals? They look at blind spots, or are there important areas that are not addressed? They look at feasibility, which is extremely important. They look at feasibility. What are the chances of the policies being enacted by legislation, executive action, or internal policy? does the candidate have the political skill to make their plan come true? Because anybody can just promise you anything. Back during the 2016 election, Jill Stein was running for president, polling at somewhere between 2% to 4% national polls. I saw African Americans right here in Detroit passing out flyers and saying, you vote for Jill Stein, she's going to help us get reparations. They said, we're going to get Jill Stein to do an executive order to give us reparations. I said, have you ever read Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution? Because you do understand that the powers of the purse string belong to Congress. They can't do an executive order for reparations. No, that's not going to happen. That has to pass both chambers of Congress, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Now, I'm still waiting for somebody to explain to me how you're going to get this passed in the Senate when, one, you got to get past the unanimous consent rule. We saw that Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn blocked 3 election integrity bills in the Senate that would have protected the elections of both Democrats and Republicans, blocked it based upon unanimous consent. Because to proceed to a debate or a vote, they had to have unanimous consent. She blocked 3 bills dealing with protecting the integrity of elections that Republicans run in. And then also, Moscow Mitch McConnell said reparations is dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate. He's Senate Majority Leader. He controls, no bill can come to the Senate floor for debate or discussion without his approval. He already said it's dead on arrival. Okay, that's a whole nother separate issue. I don't have time to get into that. Okay, that's a whole nother separate issue. But feasibility. Number 8, history. What is the candidate's history of dealing with African Americans? Has the candidate displayed a willingness to address issues of race and inequality? Number 9, intentionality. Do we believe them or do they need more people? Can we objectively believe that the candidate will work for African Americans? Is he or she pandering, or do they really have the will to make this a priority? Number 10, impact. If implemented, what impact would these policies have? How would the plan affect the problems it attempts to address? Okay, so it's the way they approach this. I've never seen a publication. I haven't seen it really, I don't think, at all, but definitely haven't seen a publication do something like this. Okay, so let's look at this. So some of these bottom feeders I'm going to skip over. Inconsequential. They dealt with Mike Bloomberg. I'm only dealing with Mike Bloomberg because people said, oh, Mike Bloomberg has a black agenda, so we need to vote for Mike Bloomberg. Okay? So the highest score is 100. Mike Bloomberg got a 43. The Greenwood Initiative is Mike Bloomberg's plan for economic justice, but he also has a number of other ideas. So we know, so they break it down. They look at economics. He got an 8. Criminal justice, he got a 7. Bloomberg wants to invest in smarter policing, implicit bias training, and prison population reduction. He proposes an end to cash bail and concentrate on recidivism prevention. He wants to legalize marijuana, but slowly. His plan to fund a conviction integrity unit is nice. Education, so he got a 6 on education. Bloomberg takes a moderate but fair approach. He plans to focus on HBCU STEM graduates, investing in schools, and funding low-income areas. Politics, he gets a 6. Comprehensiveness, he got a 4. Bloomberg has a little bit for everyone. He tackles police brutality, college admissions, and economic justice, but just a little bit. Blind spots, he gets a 4. Feasibility, he got a 2 for feasibility. Bloomberg's plans lack a lot of detail. For instance, his goal on reporting police shootings is to, quote, press state and local agencies to report all incidents to the FBI's use of force data collection, end quote. Plus, he has no legislative experience or history of building a consensus. Most of his policies don't spell out how he will enact them. Okay, he never served in Congress. He was a mayor of New York, but he never served in House of Representatives, U.S. Senate, dealing with federal legislation. History, he gets a 2. Okay, we know about stop and frisk, most people. Intentionality, he got a 1. Impact, he got a 3. So he got a 43 out of 100. Bernie Sanders got a total score of 50 out of 100. Now, I like Bernie. Bernie's a nice guy. I may disagree with him on some things. I said from the beginning, whoever gets the nomination, Democratic nomination, that's who I'm voting for. Okay? So when we look at Bernie Sanders' policies, for economics, he got a 7. Sanders' plan for economic justice is very vague. It lists the most commonly known problem, the wealth gap, redlining, housing discrimination, and vows to fix them. But it doesn't say how he will do it. He seems to rely on his plan for income inequality to answer all questions. He does not and they stated he does not support reparations. Now, very quickly, Bernie Sanders has said before, and I was in the audience when he said this, he supports H.R. 40. What Bernie Sanders has said in the past is that he's against just giving cash payments in the form of reparations, meaning he's against reparations 100% being in the form of cash payments. Okay, well, I'm against that too, because if all black people got $1 million today, white people will have it all back this time next week, and it will not bring about the structural change in our community that we need to see. So I'm against reparations being in the form 100% of cash payments. Cash payments can be part of it, like the Black Freedmen and Indian treaties of 1866. Cash payments were part of that, but they also got land, they got free taxes, free college tuition. Those are laws still in the books today for the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. Some of our ancestors were in those treaties and got compensation. That's how you get a Sarah Rector in Oklahoma, who became the richest Afro-American girl in the country in the early 1900s. Google Sarah Rector, R-E-C-T-O-R. Go to blackpast.org and search for Sarah Rector. All that ties into history. That ties into the Black Freedmen Indian treaties. It ties into the Dawes Allotment Act, the 1887, the Dawes Allotment Act. Okay, so that is a historical and legal example of some of our people getting some type of restitution. All right, so criminal justice, he gets a 5. Let me know how much time I have left, JT. Criminal justice, Bernie Sanders gets a 5. Sanders' criminal justice displays the same performative rhetoric. His details aren't revelatory, and he offers no solutions except to say that he will solve the problems. Back in, I think it was June or July of 2019 at Cobo Hall here in Detroit, Michigan, the NAACP had their national conference. They had the town hall meeting with the Democratic presidential candidates, and also Bill Weld, who's running for the Republican candidacy for Republicans. Bernie Sanders said then, when April Ryan interviewed him, part of the town hall, April Ryan was the moderator. He said then he supported H.R. 40, which is sponsored by Representative out of Texas, Representative Lee out of Texas, Barbara Lee out of Texas, I think it is. Sheila Jackson Lee, I'm sorry, Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas. He said then he supports H.R. 40. Okay, so criminal justice, he gets a 5. Education, he gets a 4. Sanders promises to make college debt free for everyone who attends a 4-year college. He also plans to cancel student debt and give $1.3 billion to HBCUs and minority-serving institutions. Aside from child care, his platform has very little, if any, information on reducing disparities in K-12 education. For education, you got a 4. Now, it's important to note, as campaigns progress, a lot of times candidates do add to their platform, add to their policies, add more details to their policies. That is true in general, okay? And we've also seen that Joe Biden has, since he's the presumptive nominee, he's adopted policies from Senator Elizabeth Warren, as well as Bernie Sanders, dealing with student debt forgiveness. Okay, thegrio.com has an article dealing with that. Okay, we're running out of time here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. We're going to continue this on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Listen to the African History Network show Sundays 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. Okay, so we're done on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. We'll continue here on our social media platforms. How's everybody doing? Those just tuning in. It's Sunday, April 26, 2020. This is the African History Network show. We do 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF in Detroit. I do radio here in Detroit. Normally, I'm in the studios at 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, but because of coronavirus, and Governor Gretchen Whitmer's stay-at-home order, they have us broadcasting from home. Okay, so we're going to continue here, and I have as long as I want to here because I'm on my own time. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook pages and YouTube. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay, all right. The article is a really good article, really good analysis from theroot.com, and I've been critical of the Root in the past, and rightfully so. But I give credit where credit is due as well. They did a good job with this. This is entitled "Every Democratic Candidate's Black Agenda Ranked." This is from February 28th, 2020. It has not been updated since then. Every Democratic candidate's black agenda ranked. This is from February 28th, 2020 from theroot.com. Okay, let's continue here. So we're looking at Bernie Sanders. Blind spots. Bernie Sanders gets a 5. Sanders doesn't have any egregious blind spots in his platform because it consists mostly of listing the problems and saying, I got this. Feasibility, he gets a 4 for feasibility. As with other platforms, without any specifics, it is hard to say if Bernie Sanders could pass these detail-free policies. As a legislator, he has not displayed much effectiveness in getting his proposals passed. And there was talk about that in the past. He doesn't have a history of getting a lot of his bills, sponsoring bills for one, and getting a lot of his bills passed too. Okay, he doesn't really have a good history of that. He's a nice guy. I think he means well. One thing people have to understand about Bernie Sanders is that Bernie Sanders is from the state of Vermont. Vermont, the population of African Americans in Vermont is something like 4 or 5%. So traditionally, a lot of issues pertaining to African Americans, at least in his state, in general, he really didn't have to deal with a whole lot of that. Okay, just because of the population of African Americans in the state of Vermont. All right, and I've known about Bernie Sanders for years, even before he ran for president. I saw him in the documentaries Koch brothers Exposed and Alec Exposed. I think those are probably on YouTube. You can watch those. I would see him on MSNBC all the time, so I was familiar with him before he even ran the first time for president. Okay, all right. So let's continue here. All right, just a second. This is running slowly. How's everybody doing today? We've got, let's see here. We got Deborah and Latonya, Philip, Renee, Dennis, Shelmadine, Terry, just a few of the people watching on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Okay. And let's see here. All right, let's let's continue. Okay, so for feasibility, he got a 4. Bernie Sanders. For history, he got a 6. Bernie Sanders voted for the '94 crime bill, but he's not happy about it. He has made some problematic statements about African Americans, but he also has a history of being on the right side of most civil rights issues. He marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and supported Jesse Jackson. We know also Jesse Jackson came out. So he supported Jesse Jackson when Jesse Jackson ran back in '88. I think it was either '84 or '88 or both. Jesse Jackson endorsed Bernie Sanders. Okay, that happened after this report came out. So intentionality, he got a 3. Here's where Bernie Sanders' problem lies. His black agenda is performative at best. It is devoid of the kind of specifics that he displays in his tax plans, his health care proposals, and his income inequality policies. And actually, they started out by saying that Bernie Sanders' plan for racial justice is only a small part of his agenda for Black America. Okay, they said that. So intentionality. Okay. Here's where Bernie Sanders' problem lies. His black agenda is performative at best. It is devoid of the kind of specifics that he displays in his tax plans, his health care proposals, and his income inequality policies. In interviews and in practice, he seems, in interviews and in practice, he seems to regard issues of race as purely a class issue. And I've seen this before with interviews that he's done, things like this. He seems to view issues of race as purely a class issue. And while race is inextricably tied to economics and class, white supremacy is not a math problem. One has to be intentional about confronting it. All right, so for intentionality, he gets a 3. And then for impact, he got a 7. If Sanders' overall policies were enacted, low income and middle class black people would undoubtedly see an economic benefit. It is a plan that includes black people, but it is not for black people. So for impact, he got a 7. He got a 50 out of 100. Okay. Tom Steyer got a 62 out of 100. Tom Steyer's campaign didn't go anywhere. Okay. So, you know, he wasted all that money. And then, let's see, who is next? Tom Steyer got a 62. Pete Buttigieg got a 66. After the first two, after Iowa and New Hampshire, is pretty much over. Pete Buttigieg, he got a 66. He had the Douglas plan. Joe Biden got a 70. Okay. Joe Biden, at the time of this reporting, February 28, 2020, Joe Biden does not have a separate plan that spells out his vision for Black America. But here's what we found by examining his platform. Now, this was at the time, this was as of February 28th. I know he's added more to his platform. I don't know if he's spelled out a vision for Black America, but I haven't had a chance to look at that since, let me try to pull this up right now. I haven't had a chance to look at this. And like I said before, as campaigns progress, oftentimes candidates do flesh out their policies and do add to their policies, okay? But based on the policies that he had as of February 28th, he got a 70. And a lot of his policies will benefit African Americans. Let's look at this. So for economics, he got a 7. Joe Biden specifically mentions redlining, housing discrimination, fair lending practices. He offers boilerplate solutions on ways to tackle the wage and income gap, but he does single out black maternal health and health disparities. He does not support reparations, as based upon this reporting here on February 28th. Now, in debates when reparations have come up, he sidestepped the issue in general. There was one article that I read, I think it was from Politico.com, around the time when he made the comments about the two white senators who were segregationists, and that whole thing was totally, largely misreported by the media. I dealt with this on my show back in June and July, and if you go to my YouTube channel, I have the clips there, and I go through step by step, and I show you how mainstream media largely misrepresented the comments that Joe Biden made, and 99.9% of the time, especially on MSNBC, and I like MSNBC, but some of it is garbage. 99.9% of the time when mainstream media reported on him talking about these two senators, they didn't tell you these were two Democratic senators he was talking about. Okay, Senator James Eastland, who was senator of Mississippi. He was known as the mouth of the White South. And there's an article from, I think it was NBCnews.com had an article dealing with this. They show Senator James Eastland in his Senate office, and behind him he has the Confederate battle flag. Okay, yeah, on a flagpole. He was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee was the committee that Joe Biden was on when he became a senator in 1973. If you want to get anything done on your committee, you have to go through the chairman. And then it was Senator Herman Talmadge of Georgia. So these were two segregationists who, this was basically after the party realignment took place, that in the foundation of the party realignment goes back to 1928, and when Herbert Hoover ran for president as a Republican, and they instituted the Lily White Movement of 1928. The Lily White Movement was a movement to push African American Republicans out of the Republican Party, ignore their issues, ignore their concerns, ignore the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, who became very powerful in the 1920s. This all deals with history. I've done an entire presentation, a 3-hour presentation, dealing with the history of why African Americans switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, and dealing with the Lily White Movement in 1928, all that stuff. Okay, so check that out. We have that available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. But there's a whole history behind this. So the majority of those Southern segregationist Democrats are going to leave the party and go to the Republican Party, like Strom Thurmond, who in 1948 ran for president as a Dixiecrat. The Dixiecrats were basically the Southern segregationist Democrats. Okay, and then you had like Northern liberals like Al Smith, and Al Smith ran against Herbert Hoover in 1928. Herbert Hoover wins the presidency. He only serves one term because Herbert Hoover mishandled the economic catastrophe known as the Great Depression, which set it up for Franklin Roosevelt to become president. Okay, and if you saw the broadcast I did this past Thursday, April 24th, I dealt with, one of the things I dealt with was 4.4 million people filed for unemployment, 26 million in 5 weeks. I also dealt with Donald Trump banning immigration for 60 days and how that's a red herring and how he's trying to use immigrants as a scapegoat. And I dealt with how Herbert Hoover tried to do the same thing back in 1931 when in the 1930s, starting with Herbert Hoover, 1.8 million Mexican Americans, well, 1.8 million Mexicans were deported back to Mexico. 60% of them were Mexican Americans, so they were U.S. citizens, and they were deported to Mexico. 60% of them were Mexican Americans, and Herbert Hoover and Republicans and a lot of white people were blaming Mexicans for taking jobs of white people during the Great Depression. It largely was not true. And when they deported them, it caused an even huger problem because it caused a lack of migrant farmers, and also those 1.8 million Mexicans were contributing to the economy. Okay, and they were largely doing jobs that white people didn't want to do. And so, and Herbert Hoover had a campaign called American Jobs for Real Americans. American Jobs for Real Americans, and they were trying to protect these jobs for white people. So they deported 1.8 million Mexicans back to America. 60% of them were born here, and they were U.S. citizens. And this is what Trump is trying to do with banning immigration, and he's trying to scapegoat immigrants. And he's saying when we want to protect these jobs for Americans, when these companies start to hire people back, right? But you don't have a problem exploiting their labor at your golf courses and your hotel resorts. And the other thing is a lot of the vegetation, a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we consume are picked by migrant workers, many of them undocumented migrants, many of them undocumented immigrants. So, and then the about $20 billion that undocumented immigrants pay in taxes each year, that just don't talk about that. The whole way this conversation is being framed is backwards. The whole way this conversation is being framed is backwards. And what they don't want to tell you is white people ain't getting out there picking blueberries and strawberries and stuff. They're not doing this. They tried that back in 1968. It didn't work. In 1968, NPR, everybody read this article. I talked about this briefly when I did my broadcast Thursday. This deals with back in 1965, when they were trying to give these jobs to white people, and they went and got high school students to do these to pick vegetation during the summer, and it didn't work. NPR National Public Radio has this article, August 23rd, 2018, when the U.S. government tried to replace migrant farm workers with high schoolers. When the U.S. government tried to replace migrant farm workers with high schoolers, okay? They were called the A-Team, okay? And the A-Team, these were supposed to be athletes, high school students who were athletes, and I think college students also, who were going to work in the fields, and they were going to give these jobs to high school students, college students. That ain't work out too well, okay? Let me see here. The year was 1965. On Cinco de Mayo, newspapers across the country reported that Secretary of Labor W. Willard Wirtz, W-I-R-T-Z, wanted to recruit 20,000 high schoolers to replace the hundreds of thousands of Mexican agricultural workers who had labored in the United States under the so-called Bracero program, B-R-A-C-E-R-O program, which is a program to allow Mexicans to come here and work as migrant workers. Because see, another thing that farmers are saying is we can't find enough people to come pick these crops. That's a little known secret that people really don't want to talk about. That farmers are saying, look, we can't find enough people to come pick these crops. These crops are going to rot on the vines. So it started in World War II. The program was an agreement between the U.S. and Mexican governments that brought Mexican men to pick harvests across the U.S. It ended in 1964 after years of accusations by civil rights activists like Cesar Chavez that migrants suffered wage theft and terrible working and living conditions. That was true. That was true. Okay? It's also true white people ain't getting out doing this for the most part. But farmers complained in words that echo today's headlines, because the farmers are complaining now. This is what Trump don't want to talk about. But farmers complained in words that echo today's headlines that Mexican laborers did the jobs that Americans didn't want to do. and that the end of the Bracero program meant that crops would rot in the fields. To understand these tensions between the U.S. and Mexico, you got to study U.S. Mexican history going back about 170 years. Even before the Mexican-American War of 1846-1848 was really over territory, and this dealt with U.S. expansion and U.S. really wanting all of North America for itself. And it ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The Mexican-American War of 1846-1848 ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, and the U.S. ended up getting the land from Mexico that makes up California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and Wyoming. They got all of that at the end of the Mexican-American War. That's the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Okay, then you go back and you study the fight between fight of the Alamo and U.S. Wanting the land that makes up Texas. And Texas won its independence in 1836. You study Vicente Guerrero, who became president of Mexico, and he was of African descent, a former slave. He becomes president about 1829 and abolishes slavery. Okay. And there's a Southern Underground Railroad where you had somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 runaway slaves who end up running into Mexico from Texas, but also from other state slaveholding states like Georgia, things like this, Georgia, Mississippi. Read the article here because I don't have time to get deep into this. I did this Thursday, April 24th. Go watch that broadcast. The U.S. deported 1 million of its own citizens to Mexico during the Great Depression. That's from History.com. History.com, July 12, 2019. The U.S. deported 1 million of its own citizens to Mexico during the Great Depression. Okay, and then we look at the little-known Underground Railroad that ran south to Mexico. The little-known Underground Railroad that ran south to Mexico. That's from History.com as well. Researchers estimate 5,000 to 10,000 people escaped from bondage into Mexico, says Maria Hammock, who is writing her dissertation about this topic at the University of Texas at Austin. But she thinks the actual numbers are higher. Mexico abolished slavery in 1829 when Texas was still part of the country, prompting white slave-holding immigrants to fight for independence in the Texas Revolution. Once they formed the Republic of Texas in 1836, they made slavery legal again, and it continued to be legal when Texas joined the U.S. as a state in 1845. So you're going to have this Southern Underground Railroad, and because Vicente Guerrero was a former slave, he abolished slavery. He was the president of Mexico. Okay? This is a little-known African-American history fact. But it wasn't only enslaved people in Texas who found freedom in Mexico. Quote, I have found individuals who made it all the way from North Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama, Maria Hammock says. So read this article here. This gets deep into history that a lot of people don't even know exists. The little-known Underground Railroad that ran south to Mexico. It's 1836 that the Texas Rangers, who are now the state police, and they're famous, law enforcement officers in the state of Texas. The Texas Rangers started out as bounty hunters who formed in 1836, and they were hired by white slave owners to go into Mexico and capture runaway slaves and bring them back to slave owners in Texas. This is how the Texas Rangers got their start. Okay, and so we have that article. And then there was one from the Washington Post. President Herbert Hoover deported 1 million Mexican Americans for supposedly stealing jobs during the Great Depression. President Herbert Hoover deported 1 million Mexican Americans for supposedly stealing jobs during the Great Depression. So that's from August 13th, 2018 from the Washington Post. Okay, so check out that article. There's a whole deep history here that a lot of people don't know. Then you can read this book here, 10-Minute Guide to U.S. History from Encyclopedia Britannica. This gives a good, concise overview of U.S. history chronologically. 10-Minute U.S. Guide to U.S. History. And very quickly here, when we look at what precedes the Mexican-American War, we look at Manifest Destiny, page 64. They talk about Manifest Destiny, right? And in Donald Trump's 2020, in his State of the Union address, he talked about Manifest Destiny of space or something like that, outer space, something like that, right? So the term Manifest Destiny was created by John L. O'Sullivan, who's the editor of a magazine that served as an organ for the Democratic Party and of a partisan newspaper. And he first wrote of Manifest Destiny in 1845. So this is the year before the Mexican-American War begins. But at the time, he did not think the words were profound. Rather than being quote-unquote coined, the phrase was buried halfway through the third paragraph of a long essay in the July-August issue of the United States Magazine and Democratic Review on the necessity of annexing Texas and the inevitability of American expansion. John L. O'Sullivan was protesting European meddling in American affairs, especially by France and England, which he said were acting, quote, for the avowed object of thwarting our policy and hampering our power, limiting our greatness and checking the fulfillment of our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our yearly multiplying millions, end quote. So John L. O'Sullivan's observation was a complaint rather than a call for aggression, and he referred to demography rather than pugnacity as the solution to the perceived problem of European interference. But he was complaining about Europeans interfering in U.S. expansion to take over all of the territory of North America. Democrats took up Manifest Destiny as a slogan. The phrase frequently appeared in debates relating to the state of Oregon, with the territory of Oregon, sometimes as soaring rhetoric and other times as sarcastic derision. An example of the latter, on February 6, 1846, the New Hampshire Statesman and State Journal, a Whig newspaper. The Whig was a political party that existed like 1830s, 1840s. It existed before the Republican Party. The Republican Party was founded in 1854. You have the Whig Party, and then also 1830s, 1840s, you're going to have the American Nativist Party, which was also ostensibly known as the Know Nothing Party. And they were largely made up of poor white people who blamed immigrants for taking their jobs. Sounds a lot like Donald Trump supporters. They were called the Know Nothing Party, ostensibly known as the Know Nothing Party, but they were known as the American Party or the American Nativist Party. Okay, so they're in the 1830s, 1840s. So a Whig newspaper described, quote, some windy orator in the House of Representatives as pouring for his manifest destiny. Okay, so check out this book, and it deals with also a history of expansion as well. Okay, this is a really good book that gives a good, concise overview of U.S. history. I got this at Sam's Club, $7.78. This is from Encyclopedia Britannica, 10-minute guide to U.S. history. So, when we look at this, and to understand these policies and all this, and even to put together the Black Agenda, you have to have a good understanding of history and the impact that policies have had on African Americans. Okay, so we look at Joe Biden, economics, he got a 7. Criminal justice, he got a 7. Again, Joe Biden tackles most of criminal justice issues that are prevalent in America. One of the unique areas that he confronts is the criminalization of girls, foster children, and abused children. He also puts effort into violence against women and reintegrating the formerly incarcerated. Criminal justice, he got a 7. Education, he got a 6. And let me see. There's a comprehensive. Let's talk about the crime bill. Okay, I'm gonna give you some information here on the crime bill. Because I hear a whole lot of people talking about it, and I can tell they don't understand history once again. Go to bjs.gov, Bureau of Justice Statistics, and look at U.S. prison populations from 1970 to 1993. The U.S. prison population quadruples from 1970 to 1993. It goes from about 300,000 to about 1.3 million in 1993. This is before the crime bill was signed September 13, 1994. I hear a lot of people saying that the crime bill created mass incarceration, things like that. No, it did not. The U.S. prison population quadruples from 1970 to 1993. You have to go back and study Richard Nixon's war on drugs. President Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs June 17, 1971. Okay? He ran for president in 1968. He ran on the platform of law and order. Law and order means protect white people and lock up African Americans. Richard Nixon ran as a backlash to the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, Executive Order 11246 of 1965, which we call affirmative action, September 1965, which we call affirmative action. He runs as a backlash of all this. He runs as a backlash to the rebellions taking place across the country. 1967 Detroit Rebellion and Newark, New Jersey Rebellion, things like this. And we know 1967 alone, there were 159 violent uprisings in this country. 159 violent uprisings in 1967 alone. USA Today has a good article, deals with the Newark, New Jersey Rebellion of 67. They talk about the long, hot summer of 1967. Read that article, okay? Nixon runs as a backlash to all of that. In the early 1970s, there's a changing mood in this country regarding drug usage, drug sellers, and how to deal with it, And there's a move away from prescribing. Treatment for them, to moving towards taking a hard line, cracking down on them, locking them up. You have movies in the early 1970s, like The French Connection. There's a changing mood in the country, okay? So you have Nixon that declares his war on drugs in front of the U.S. Congress, demanding more funding, increase in funding for the war on drugs. It's June 17, 1971. 1973, you have Governor Nelson D. Rockefeller, of the governor of New York at the time. And he wants to run for president. He originally took a soft line to people who use drugs and prescribed treatment. But because he wants to run for president and there's a changing mood in the country, this is 73, 74, he changes his position and he institutes the Rockefeller drug laws in the state of New York, which gives long, harsh sentences for low-level nonviolent drug offenders. He institutes mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums were in the 94 crime bill. But they go back to 20 years before then with Governor Nelson D. Rockefeller in the state of New York. In the 1970s, states started passing longer, harsher sentences for criminals. This didn't start in 94. This goes back to the 1970s. It goes to the 1970s, continues in the 1980s, continues into the early 90s. States are already doing this. 94 crime bill is not state law, it's federal law. About 87% of the people who go to prison, once the crime bill takes effect and signed into law, about 87% of the people go under state law, not federal law. States had already started passing longer, harsher sentences. They're going to continue to do this. When you go to bjs.gov and you look at the U.S. prison populations, go back to 1970, and you go into the 80s and go into the 90s and go even before the crime bill, because violent crimes peak nationwide in 1992. Violent crimes peak nationwide in 1992. So you're going to see the U.S. prison population going like this. Before the crime bill is signed, you're going to see the U.S. prison population going like this, because the U.S. prison population quadruples from 1970 to 1993. Okay? So I'm not saying the crime bill was good. In all actuality, it was mixed when you actually look at what was in it. A lot of people haven't looked at what was in it. They just see 3 strikes and you're out. They haven't looked at this thing holistically and understanding the basically 25 years of history prior to it being signed into law. So you have to look at, you can't just look at something like this at one point in time when it was signed into law. You have to look at the history prior to that, because we have to understand all this chronologically. Okay, so the article from NPR.org, and I'm going to give you information dealing with what was actually in the crime bill also. The article from NPR.org is, let's see, what's the name of that one? Rockefeller Drug Laws. Let's bring this up here. All right, just a second. This will come up here. This deals with the history of the Rockefeller drug laws. Also, the crime bill did. Now, Joe Biden wrote the majority of the crime bill. He did not write all of the crime bill. He wrote the majority of the crime bill. It allocated about $9.8 billion for states to build more prisons if they adhere to like certain rules, certain laws. Okay, 28 states out of 50 took advantage of that. All 50 states didn't do that. It was 28 states out of 50. The Brennan Center for Justice has information dealing with this. It was 28 states out of 50. Let's see, read this article from NPR.org. The drug laws that changed how we punish. The drug laws that changed how we punish. This deals with the history of the Rockefeller drug laws. And this goes back to 1973 and 1974. And this is where mandatory minimums come from, okay, that were put into the 94 crime bill. Keep in mind, 87% of the people who went to prison during the time, once the crime bill became law, 87% of the people who went to prison went under state law, not federal law. The crime bill was federal law. Also, it's important to note, so you had African American big city mayors who were advocating for the crime bill. Because once again, you have to go back and study context and what was taking place at that time. Violent crime across the country was buck wild. Like I said, violent crime, when you go, I went to bjs.gov and I looked at the crime statistics. Violent crimes peaked in 1992. You had constituents, you had African Americans, white people, Hispanics, putting pressure on big city mayors and police chiefs to do something about this crime. So when you have big city mayors who are supporting the crime bill, it wasn't because they just want to just lock a whole lot of black people up. It's because they're trying to address this issue in their communities. This is what this was. Now the crime bill went too far. But at the same time, the prison population was really already out of hand by then. I mean, prison population quadruples from 300,000 to about 1.3 million. in about 25 years, from 1970 to 1993, about 23 years. Okay? So this thing is already out of control. But the crime bill, it got worse with the crime bill. But it didn't start with it. Okay, so read this article here. We'll post this link here. This is from NPR.org. Read that article. And then there's one from NJ. I'll give you two other ones. One is from NJ. What is it? The computer's freezing up here. It's one that deals with. It's a 94 crime bill fact sheet, and it shows everything that was in the crime bill. That's one. The other is a good article from Vox.com, Vox.com. The Clinton-backed 1994 crime law had many flaws, but it did not create mass incarceration, which is true. It did not. The Clinton-backed 1994 crime law had many flaws, but it did not create mass incarceration. That's by German Lopez. That is from April 8th, 2016 for Vox.com, Vox.com. Check that out. All right. Let's continue here. Also, you can search online because at I think it's Congress.gov. I got it. The full crime bill is like 356 pages, and I've gone through and started reading some of it. You can read the full 1994 crime bill to see exactly what it was as well. Okay, but when we deal with all this, we have to understand context and what was going on at that time. The other thing is that a lot of people don't know is that 53% of gang-related murders between 1980 and 2008. 53% of gang-related murders from 1980 to 2008 were committed by white people. Okay? A lot of people don't want to talk about this. Because, see, the way gang-related murders were covered by the 6 o'clock news and 11 o'clock news, they made it just a black or Hispanic thing. It was taking place in our communities, but it was buck wild in the white communities. So you had white constituents and white parents also crying out about the crime in their communities. It was white people, Hispanics, African Americans, putting pressure on their elected officials to do something about the crime. 56% of the victims of gang-related murders were white people. 53% of the people who committed gang-related murders were white people, because there was a lot of white gangs. But a lot of the white gangs were not talked about on the 6 o'clock news. It was presented as a black and Hispanic thing. But gang violence was big in white communities. Okay? So there was an article I found out about this. I heard about this before, but there was a good article from AtlantaBlackStar.com that dealt with 9 facts about white-on-white crime and how news outlets concede it, something to that effect. Okay? It's from AtlantaBlackStar.com. And fact number 7 dealt with white gang violence. So that came from a Bureau of Justice Statistics study. It's a 36-page study. I went and read the study. Page 12, table number 7, deals with gang-related murders. And it talks about how the majority of them were committed by white people. Okay? So there's a whole backstory to all of this that's not really talked about. All right. So let's continue here. All right, let's continue. So you have feasibility. Let me see, who would he vote for Joe Biden? Okay, you got a score of 70, and so criminal justice, he tackles most of the criminal justice issues that are prevalent in America. He has a criminal justice reform program. He has come out and talked about how the 94 crime bill went too far also. BusinessInsider.com has an article dealing with that as well. So one of the unique areas that he confronts is the criminalization of girls, foster children, and abused children. He also puts effort into violence against women and reintegrating the formerly incarcerated. Now, it's also important to note, and you've heard me talk about this before, I may be one of the few people to talk about it. The U.S. prison population dropped to the lowest point in 20 years under President Obama, December 2015. U.S. prison population dropped to its lowest point in 20 years in December 2015. And there was an article from Newsweek.com that talks about this. And there was a report from the Department of Justice in December 2016 that showed this. Okay, and under the Obama administration, we see that the U.S. prison population drops each year under the Obama administration because the war on drugs was largely winding down under the Obama administration. Okay, and this is a lot of people don't know the percentage of African Americans in prison dropped from 40% down to 34% under the Obama administration. All of this, okay, and a lot of this stuff is being reversed under Trump. People talk about First Step Act, but all these other policies from Trump dealing with criminal justice are not beneficial to African Americans. A lot of those under President Obama were. And we saw that it was Trump's first Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who reversed the 2013 initiative from Attorney General Eric Holder called Smart on Crime. And Smart on Crime dealt with backing off of charging low-level, non-violent drug offenders with the longest, harshest sentences. Okay, this was an initiative from the Department of Justice. And we also saw that a lot of states and state attorney generals and things like this backed off of, we saw reforms at various state levels, okay, which could, and a lot of states backed off of charging low-level, non-violent drug offenders with the longest, harshest sentences, etc. Okay, and so all this contributed to a decline in the U.S. prison population under President Obama. All right. So when we look at, criminal justice, Biden gets a 7. Education, he gets a 6. Biden tackles K through 12 funding, HBCU funding, and school inequality. He has one of the few campaigns that tie redlining and zip codes to education inequality. He has one of the few campaigns that ties redlining and zip codes to education inequality. He also focuses on putting black teachers in schools, which we know is huge. When you have qualified black teachers in schools teaching African American children, that helps boost their achievement and also boost the percentages of them that go to college as well. His idea to offer a path from community colleges to HBCUs is innovative. So for education, he gets a score of 6. For politics, he gets a score of 5. The Biden campaign does not really address voting rights except to say that he plans to use the Department of Justice on violators. He also wants to incentivize states to restore voting rights to felons. Okay. Now, once again, I think he's going to expand a lot of these policies. In general, as campaigns progress, they usually flesh out and add to their policies. Okay, for comprehensiveness, he gets a 9. Here's where Biden has the advantage. In almost every area, he can point to actual legislation and policy that he has passed or enacted during the Obama administration. The only thing that hurts Biden is that he can point to specific actions and legislative plans from his tenure as vice president, which makes his more aspirational plans look sparse when he doesn't provide specifics. Also, you've heard me talk about this before. It's important for everybody to read this. Read this document here. Progress of the African American community during the Obama administration. This is at whitehouse.gov. You don't have to believe me. You can go read this yourself. Progress of the African American community during the Obama administration. This is at whitehouse.gov. This goes through category by category and shows how the policies from the Obama administration positively impacted the African American community. A lot of people don't want to talk about this because most of them don't know about this. A lot of these policies are either under attack by Trump or they have been reversed by Trump or severely weakened. Okay? When Donald Trump asked, what the hell do you have to lose? Our response should have been everything. But most people don't know this exists. Okay? And you hear me talk about the Affordable Health Care Act. The Affordable Health Care Act gave health care to 3 million non-elderly African Americans who did not already have health care. Okay, and today you have less people you have less African Americans today who have health care than when President Obama left office. So this is not about Democrat or Republican, it's about policies that benefit African Americans. All right, let's continue here. So comprehensiveness, he gets a score of 9. Blind spots, he gets a score of 7. Biden does not specifically address gerrymandering or voting security. He also doesn't mention white supremacist violence. Overall, his plan has few holes. For feasibility, he gets a 10. Joe Biden has more legislative and executive experience than almost any politician in history. He knows how to compromise and get laws passed. Okay? So feasibility, he gets a 10. He understands how to negotiate with the Senate. For history, he gets a 5. Aside from his brief war, aside for dragging Anita Hill through the mud, etc., writing a crime bill that disproportionately incarcerated black men. Once again, like I said, we really need to go and study the crime bill, and very few people talk about the fact that about 87% of the people who went to prison once the crime bill was passed, they went under state law. States had already started passing longer, harsher sentences in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. So when we talk about the crime bill, all of that has to be put in perspective as well. There were some bad things in the crime bill. 3 strikes and you're out, the death penalty. I'm against the death penalty, period. I'm totally against the death penalty because it's disproportionately used against African Americans. But a lot of times when we talk about the crime bill, it's not put into proper context and is not dealt with accurately. So we have to really deal with it accurately. So for history, he gets a 5. It says, to be fair, he has a good voting record on a lot of civil rights legislation, affirmative action, and most progressive race-based policies. For intentionality, he gets an 8. Biden worked for a black boss as a VP. He was surrounded by African Americans who were smarter than him, like Susan Rice, Michelle Obama, Eric Holder, Jay Johnson, who was Homeland Security Director. This might not seem like much, but 8 years listening to African Americans is something few people few white people have ever done. Okay, intentionality, he gets an 8. For impact, he gets a 6. Biden's policies are progressive but not groundbreaking. He wants to fix the inequalities through conventional means and left-center legislation. However, if enacted, they would make a significant impact. And this is what people have to understand. A black agenda is good to have. Well, black agenda is not what we wait on people to give to us. That's what we present to the candidates. That gives us a measuring stick to measure the candidates by, measure their policies by, and see how the policies of candidates measure up to our issues, our concerns. Okay? But a policy does not have to say black or African American to benefit you, and does not have to say black or African American to disproportionately positively benefit you either. This is what we have to understand. For instance, in July of 2019, Democrats in the House of Representatives passed a bill to raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour, where it currently is right now, to $15 an hour by the year 2025. That will disproportionately positively impact African Americans, especially African American women, who on average make 61 cents for every dollar that the average white male makes. And this is what Black Women's Equal Pay Day is all about. And then we know in the state of Louisiana, African American women make 47 cents for every dollar that the average white male makes. In general, it takes the average African American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white male makes in 12 months. African American men make about 79, 80 cents on the dollar the average white male makes. When you go, now you're not going to get rich $15 an hour, but $15 an hour is a floor, not a ceiling. But it will lift millions of African Americans out of poverty if that bill is enacted. It passed the House of Representatives. It's being blocked in the Senate by Moscow Mitch McConnell and Republicans in the Senate. Read this article from blackenterprise.com. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. And when we look at the average African American woman, over a 40-year working career from age 18 to like about age 60, the average African American woman will lose out on $946,120 over a 40-year career if she continues to make 61 cents on the dollar that every white man earns due to the wage gap. Analysis by the National Women's Law Center shows. Read this article. This is deep. This impacts African American communities, our families, African American women, our families, African American men. All of this is negatively impacted by this. Okay, and also the Paycheck Fairness Act would help this a lot. The Paycheck Fairness Act needs to be passed by the U.S. Senate. It's already passed the House of Representatives. Read this article from blackenterprise.com. Now, this deals with how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. Okay, this deals with how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers thanks to the wage gap. Okay, yeah, check out that article. And then also there's one from Forbes.com on Black Women's Equal Pay Day. Here's how women are fighting to close the gap. This is from August 22nd, 2019 on Black Women's Equal Pay Day. Here's how women are fighting to close the gap. And Black Women's Equal Pay Day is it fell on August 22nd. It fell on August 22nd, 2019. Okay, so check out those articles. I've done broadcasts in the past dealing with all of this. All right, so as we wrap this up now, Elizabeth. Visit JoeBiden.com. Look at his policies. He's expanded his policies, adopted policies from Bernie Sanders as well, at dealing with student loan forgiveness up to $100,000, and also from Elizabeth Warren. There's an article from thegrio.com that deals with this. deals with Joe Biden adopting these policies. Senator Elizabeth Warren got a 79. Senator Elizabeth Warren got a 79 out of 100. She got the highest. Okay, check out this article here from TheRoot.com. You can read it in its entirety. February 28, 2020. Every Democratic candidate's black agenda ranked. Every Democratic candidate's black agenda ranked. Okay, and visit my website. I have my lectures there dealing with 6 principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. And what's most important is whose policies are most beneficial for African Americans, whose policies will do the least amount of harm, who can create an environment for us to push our agenda the farthest and get the most accomplished. Okay? Who can create an environment for us to push our agenda the farthest and get the most accomplished, whose policies are most realistic. All right? This all deals with understanding principles of political self-defense. We must understand law and history. The foundation is the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution is the foundation for law in this country. We don't understand the U.S. Constitution. We don't understand history. We don't understand law. So that's why we have to really study all of this, and this will help formulate a black agenda, and this will help understand how these policies impact us on a daily basis and impact our economics as well. Okay, so you'll hear me talk about this more in the upcoming broadcast. We have to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. You can donate to the African History Network, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All of my DVD lectures are at our website as well. We have bundle packs there, like the Black Migration 1619 to 2019 bundle pack, which includes 6 principles of political self-defense. Right now, it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. For Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.